All right, then I'm going to go back to the slides, I think. Are we back to the slides? Revisions. Okay, so we're on the final comments from pretty much anybody. I'll open it up. I do. So for my part, I apologize about the 100-person limit, and I'm glad we fixed that. Thanks again to Jen Peterson. And we'll move ahead from there. One of the question I have for the advisory committee and the larger group is, as we move ahead with the COVID-19 kind of making this up as we go along, would you find it useful, maybe not having big meetings like this, but to set a time aside basically for kind of a Q&A or ability to ask questions, and we could just open it up? You know, I was thinking like Liz and I and the DRDs could just, you know, agree to be here on Zoom with a particular number, and people can join, ask questions, talk through things, just be available kind of a little bit more face-to-face than email, if that would be helpful. You know, we could do that. I think of that because I know the commissioner is doing weekly talks with some of the larger groups, like as I said, the drinking water suppliers that have very specific questions and issues. I'm not sure where we have the same vital need to be in close contact every week, but I would offer that up as an opportunity to touch base every week just to see what's going on. If that would be helpful, I can set up a meeting and schedule it.
It might be worth trying it to, you know, for a couple times and see if there's any, if it makes sense. Yep. If people do have enough questions to make it worth keeping this.
And yeah, I view it kind of as like office hours would be at university. You know, if people don't show up, then that's fine. I can, you know, do work on the side as well.
No, I think it's a good idea. I agree with Larry. Let's give it a try and see how it goes.
Okay, I'll set up a weekly time. I'll schedule it, send it out, let people know, and really don't feel compelled to come just because it's there. But anybody would be welcome for that.
Can I, Paul? It's Jeff.
Hi, Jeff.
Can I come back to the deadlines question?
Sure.
I've been ruminating on it for the rest of the meeting, and looking at the order on the LSP extensions, which clearly evidences how you can take account of the effect of the crisis if one chooses to. I'm concerned that anything other than something like that with respect to MCP deadlines, certainly accepting out potential imminent hazards, is going to cause people who down the road are looking at what was done and whether there was an exemption to say, well, when the state wanted to extend a deadline, it knew how to extend a deadline. So I would just ask the department to continue to think about that as it thinks about the guidance front, about how whatever the department does compares with what was done on the LSP licensure issue.
Yeah. And there are people that are actively thinking about it as we speak, much of the day yesterday, and we'll see what comes out of that. I think what at the moment what we're talking about and what is directly within waste site cleanup's control is working with the regulations that we have. And what can we say now within that context? That's not to say that there may not be other alternatives that may also be pursued and may come out subsequently. So I think we're looking at it at several different levels. What can we do with the current rules? Can the rules be changed? Can the laws be changed? Can executive orders be issued? And as you go further down the line and bigger, more people involved at many different levels, I can't foresee what will come out of that. So right now, I'm both focusing on what we can do within our program, while at the same time talking to the people that are also having those discussions. And I'm trying very carefully not to say anything very detailed, because I don't know what will be coming out of that. And I don't want to give the impression that I do. But those discussions are going on.
Hey, Paul and Liz, do you have an idea on a target publication date for the MCP amendments?
Oh, let me take this, Liz. No. And Marilyn, you remember from years of doing this, going through these, I can give you a date, and it's often meaningless. And I would view finalizing those regs and publishing them as part of our normal operations, which in the best of times I have a very hard time predicting. I can't imagine that while the state of emergency is going on, that we would be able to get the necessary attention from the senior people above us that need to review and approve this material in order to publish it. It's just not going to be high on their priority list. So what we are aiming for is to have that package kind of ready, having gone through the edits, having discussions, both internal and, if necessary, external. See, Lisa, I kept that open. On the regs, so that when the state of emergency ends and people are ready and have the bandwidth to look at it and go through the approval process, that we'll be ready to move it forward. And I think that's the best I can promise now.
Fair enough. Thanks.
On the weekly Zoom fests,
Ooh,
one suggestion that may be helpful for everybody is, to the extent people have questions that they identify before the event, probably useful to send them by email to Paul and Liz, both so they have a heads up and can provide more detailed feedback. And then also that way, Paul and Liz can get a sense of how many questions there are. If there are a ton in comparison to a few, that may help from a scheduling perspective.
Yep. Yes, that would be helpful, because if you come with a question, I wouldn't discourage that, but if that's the first time we hear the question, the likelihood of us giving a definitive answer is smaller. But if you can send it beforehand, that would be helpful. And Zoom Fest is good. I hope that's not already taken.
I just wrote that down too. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
The other thing I want to pass on, that I read, I'm looking back in my notes. Somebody used the term and can I go to dark humor for a moment? Okay, recognizing this is dark humor. People I have heard the term, we're looking for the COVID-19 apocalypse or whatever that, somebody referred to it as boomer remover. It's kind of dark, sorry.
As a boomer, I'm a little offended by that, but that's okay.
Me too.
Hey,
So,
Paul,
yep.
I'm sorry, it's Marilyn again, not to monopolize, but Ned's suggestion just led to another possible one, and not to make more work for anybody, but maybe a COVID-19 focused Q&A might be beneficial.
Yes. We have some of the talking points that we talked about today, and others. We have some guidance Q&A, whatever you want to call it, in preparation. I mentioned early on that we are trying, as a state, we're trying to be very consistent and speak with one voice and have everything in one place. So that does mean that the written material that we provide does go through more of a review process than you would anticipate, anything that's related to COVID-19. So that is in the works. and it will be available when it is ready, both on the DPH or Uber site, and we will link to it as well. Oh, somebody mentions that if you want COVID-19 updates from the Baker administration, you can text COVIDMA, COVID-MA, to 888-777, and you'll get updates from the governor of Massachusetts. Thank you. Any other questions, issues? I have one last lighter thing at the end to go to, but want to cover anything that you may have
Hey,
first.
Paul, it's Steve. Just one final question on the COVID stuff. So while we're waiting for the guidance or the DEP to, or the, I guess it's the DEP to issue the document you're talking about, how deadlines are handled and all that kind of stuff. And I came in the meeting more expecting the conversation around when you run into situations and you can't meet deadlines. Was I correct when it was being talked about that, you know, there's this gray area in terms of what's essential and so forth? So like for routine sampling on a long-term M&A site, is the department's position that you're actually directing us that we should not be doing that sampling because it's not essential?
Anybody want to take that from the regional perspective?
And can you provide that in writing? No, I'm just kidding.
Let me, do we have a doodle function? I can just write it down on the screen. So from the wayside cleanup perspective, I can tell you what we're doing. For instance, we are reviewing our work and long-term M&A. We have sites that we oversee that have monitoring schedules in place. We have sites where we're running pump and treat systems, for example. So on one hand, pump and treat systems where we do want to, where they're operating, we want to keep them going. We're controlling the groundwater. Letting them go for a couple months would be problematic. We're continuing to staff those facilities and run those operations. Try to minimize the number of people there, keep them separate, of course, all of that good stuff. But they keep going. We do have a pump and treat system, for example, that has been down because of a study that we're doing. It was scheduled to come back up and resume operations. We've made the decision to keep it down, that it's not worth restarting it and creating that potential COVID exposure during the next couple of months, compared to, it's been down for several months now. Another couple of months is not going to be a significant difference. Routine monitoring for some of the sites that we have, if it can be put off until later, if it's not critical to know what the concentration is now versus 2 months from now, then that's something that we're going to put off at our sites. So I think you have to look at each one individually and really decide, is this sampling, is this result, is it really something that I need to do now? And if it's not, then that's something I think that we would agree. If you have any specific questions about a specific site, check with the regional office. It's worth the call or the email to make sure that we agree with it. But that's the sort of kind of rationale that we're working out in our own minds. Any word from the regions about that interpretation?
Paul, this is Steve.
Yep.
Steve Johnson. I agree with what you say. If it's during the time period of the state of emergency, then the routine kind of activities can be put off. I think that's what the administration wants us to do. So I concur with you.
Yeah, I think overall we are, and our commissioners has stressed this time and time again, um, that we often want to do our jobs as best we can and kind of continue normal operations. And we have staff who are willing to come into the office and continue working. We have staff who are willing to go out and do this routine work. And we are stressing with our staff from the commissioner's office on down that this is a unique situation. You should not be minimized. We should not take any unnecessary risk, not only to ourselves, but keeping in mind that by going out, we are putting other people potentially at risk. We're putting the health systems potentially at risk. So it's not just about us and about our ability to do our job, it's how it affects everybody else. And because of that, we are trying to be very flexible and really keep the field work and the necessary operations to that which is in fact necessary, not just, it would be a good idea.
Paul, it's Eileen Gladstone. I have a question on another topic.
Sure, I think.
Wanted to have you talk a little bit about the DOR regulations on the brownfields tax credits, and what is DEP's role in review and comment, and how will you be participating in the development of those regs?
Okay, I'll say a couple things and then open up to DEP staff, and then you'll see to you guys. So Department of Revenue, another state agency, we certainly will comment and work with them as a sister agency with their regs, and that will be not publicly, not so we in general we don't take official positions on other people's regulations, but we will provide comment and work with them in other avenues. We would certainly encourage, and if you like, I think I would turn it over to the advisory committee and everybody else. Certainly encourage you all to look at the DOR regs, to talk amongst yourselves, and you can begin talking now, and to submit comments. The deadline for end of the public comment period is in April sometime.
There is this not even official draft. I don't remember the exact way they describe it. I think it's like a working draft, sort of an informal working draft, and they've asked for feedback by April 3rd. And then I believe after that, I don't know how long after that, there'll be a more formal regulation issue in draft and formal comment period. And then after that, there'll be the final regs. So I think there are a couple of rounds of opportunities for comment at this point.
Yeah, so if anybody would like to take a few minutes and talk about the regs, DEP will just sit back and listen. But it would be worth talking kind of amongst yourselves here, just describing them, kind of what your issues may be, et cetera.
I'll take a shot at it. The program, as probably most people know, was initiated as part of the Brownfields bill back in 1998. And since then, it's operated without regs for quite a long period of time. Folks who work with the program frequently have gotten to where there's an informal understanding of how things work, and some various questions have come up. And I think through no fault of DOR, the original statutory language does not seem to have been written with a lot of input from people who know the MCP at all. And so there are problems that arise from that. I think the regs now, my political take on it is in part in an effort to provide more guidance to people, because I think DOR was becoming concerned about some of the more aggressive positions that were included in some of the applications. And so my take on it, admittedly from the developer perspective, is that they're trying to cut that back a bit. Generally, I think they're helpful. They're intended to be helpful. There are a number of specific places where there are problems, some of which are quite significant, particularly in terms of subsequent review by DOR of things that they've already signed off on, which are potentially very problematic. And I think the other conceptual problem, as opposed to drafting in specific language and things of that sort, is through no fault of their own, these poor DOR folks have been asked to become MCP experts and decide what's going to happen with the state's money with respect to that. And it's put them in a difficult position. And because of their understandable lack of understanding about both the MCP and how construction works, some of the provisions just reflect that ignorance. You know, again, with no intent one way or the other, but just not having a good understanding of how the stuff works, some of the proposed regs just don't fit. So that's, I guess, the 50,000 foot perspective.
Anybody else want to say anything? I've pulled up the DR working draft regs. As you can see, if you just go to the mass.gov and search for Massachusetts Brownfields Tax Credit Working Draft, it should bring you there.
This is Larry. I think that Ned, you did a great job of summarizing that document in a relatively short period of time. NAOP and the LSPA are both submitting comments on this, and I'm sure other organizations are as well. You know, the devil, as always, is in the details. You know, a lot of you know, subtle wording things that really have to be looked at carefully and commented on.
And as Larry said, some organizations are putting together comments. You know, it may be, once we've all put together our comments, a good topic of conversation for one of your weekly calls, so that the department, I appreciate they're not your regulations, but could, you know, get the perspective from practitioners and developers firsthand what our comments are, so that when you're having discussions with DOR, you know, in some ways, you know, you provide some of the ability as a translator, since you folks obviously understand the you know, the MCP to where DOR doesn't. So I think you understanding our comments will help the process.
Yeah, that's a very good point. One of the big issues is who decides what's necessary. I mean, obviously the regs right now say the commissioner, the DOR commissioner, is going to make that decision. As Ned pointed out in his very gentlemanly way, that commissioner may not be thoroughly versed in the subtleties of waste site cleanup or construction. So we have someone that is probably less knowledgeable of this, making a decision about what had to be done as part of this cleanup. So that sorting that out is going to be the most delicate part of this discussion, I think.
Okay, well, I look forward to hearing your thoughts at one of the weekly Zoom fests, or whatever we choose to call it.
Well, I like Zoom Fest. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'm going to put in a plug for one last fun thing. For those of you, including the DEP staff that are here listening in, there we go. One of the kind of side projects that I'm working on is uploading a vast collection of random slides that I discovered and liberated from a storage closet. And they're being uploaded to MassDEP's Flickr site. And what would really appreciate some help in doing is going through, and if you see something that you recognize, for instance, this one is Silresum. I know that, so I've put in the notes that this is an aerial view of the Silresum Superfund site in Lowell, Massachusetts. So it adds some context and allows people to find them. It would be helpful if you have some time as you're sitting at home, wondering what you can do in isolation. You might find it amusing to go through these slides, and if you see something you recognize or can provide an anecdote about or provide some context, it would be helpful to just go click on it and add a comment about what you're seeing on the slide, what it might be. And like, for instance, this one, I would comment that my uncle used to work on that tugboat.
Wow.
But the Saturn. He also worked on the Hercules and the Orion. So just a little amusing thing to do, no vital purpose, but except kind of rescuing and saving and preserving MassDEP's history and kind of the history of the work that we do. Some of these go back, there are some of them, these, for instance, go back to the 1950s. That's air pollution, looking across Boston Common towards the non-existent Hancock Building. Well, no, I guess that is the Hancock Building you're seeing there. And that was, I picked the wrong one. That was in 1956. So just something to think of, something amusing to do as we fill up our time.
Thank you, Paul.
So,
Hey, one last thing. As a rookie Zoom Fest coordinator, I think you did a fine job with Liz. Nice work.
well, thank you. We're learning how to do this. Next time, I hope to have a better background. Actually. So as we sign off, and feel free to sign off, but I do want to show you what happens if you turn on the virtual background. Like that. Is that now working? Oh yeah, there we go. See, that's what happens when you put a blue shirt against a light blue background. So have a good rest of the week. Expect to see a schedule for weekly meeting Zoom Fest to get together. And again, no pressure to show up. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Good luck. Wash your hands.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks,
Bye.
Liz.
Yep, thanks, Liz.
Bye, everyone.